First Samuel in Hebrew, chapters 18 through 20. And it came to pass, when he had finished speaking to Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him in that day, and did not suffer him to return to his father's house. And Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of his upper garment, and gave it to David, and his mantle, and all he had upon him, even to his sword and his bow, and to his girdle. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and acted wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was pleasing in the eyes of all the people, and also in the eyes of the servants of Saul. And there came out women in dances to meet David out of all the cities of Israel, with timbrels, and with rejoicing, and with cymbals. And the women began the strain, and said, Saul has smitten his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And it seemed evil in the eyes of Saul concerning this matter. And he said, To David they have given 10,000s, and to me they have given thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day and onward. And it came to pass on the morrow that an evil spirit from God fell upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of his house. And David was playing on the harp with his hand, according to his daily custom. And Saul's spear was in his hand. And Saul took his spear and said, I will smite David even to the wall. But David escaped twice from his presence. And Saul was alarmed on account of David, and he removed him from him, and made him a captain of 1,000 for himself. And he went out and came in before the people. And David was prudent in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. And Saul saw that he was very wise, and he was afraid of him. And all Israel and Judah loved David, because he came and went out before the people. And Saul said to David, Behold, my elder daughter Merob, I will give her to thee to wife. Only be thou to me a mighty man, and fight the wars of the Lord. And Saul said, Let not my hand be upon him, but the hand of the Philistine shall be upon him. And David said to Saul, Who am I, and what is the life of my father's family in Israel, that I should be the king's son-in-law? But it came to pass at the time when Merob, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given to Israel the Mahthulathite to wife. And Melchol, the daughter of Saul, loved David. And it was told Saul, and the thing was pleasing in his eyes. And Saul said, I will give her to him, and she shall be a stumbling block to him. Now the hand of the Philistines was against Saul, and Saul charged his servants, saying, Speak ye privately to David, saying, Behold, the king delights in thee, and all his servants love thee, and do thou become the king's son-in-law. And the servants of Saul spoke these words in the ears of David. And David said, Is it a light thing in your eyes to become a son-in-law to the king? Whereas I am a humble man, and not honorable? And the servants of Saul reported to him according to these words, which David spoke. And Saul said, Thus shall ye speak to David, The king wants no gift but 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to avenge himself on the king's enemies. Now Saul thought to cast him into the hands of the Philistines. And the servants of Saul report these words to David, and David was well pleased to become the son-in-law to the king. And David arose, and went he and his men, and smote among the Philistines 100 men. And he brought their foreskins, and he became the king's son-in-law. And Saul gives him Melchol his daughter to wife. And Saul saw that the Lord was with David, and that all Israel loved him. And he was yet more afraid of David. And the chief of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass that from the sufficiency of their expedition, David acted wisely above all the servants of Saul, and his name was honored exceedingly. And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son, and to all his servants, to slay David. And Jonathan, Saul's son, loved David much. And Jonathan told David, saying, Saul seeks to kill thee. Take heed to thyself therefore tomorrow morning, and hide thyself, and dwell in secret. And I will go forth, and stand near my father in the field where thou shalt be. And I will speak concerning thee to my father. And I will see what his answer may be, and I will tell thee. And Jonathan spoke favorably concerning David to Saul his father, and said to him, Let not the king sin against thy servant David, for he has not sinned against thee, and his deeds are very good. And he put his life in his hand, and smote the Philistine. And the Lord wrought a great deliverance, and all Israel saw and rejoiced. Why then dost thou sin against innocent blood, to slay David without a cause? And Saul hearkened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, saying, As the Lord lives, he shall not die. And Jonathan called David, and told him all these words. And Jonathan brought David into Saul, and he was before him as in the former times. And there was again war against Saul, and David did valiantly, and fought against the Philistines, and smote them with a very great slaughter, and they fled from before him. And an evil spirit from God was upon Saul, and he was resting in his house, and a spear was in his hand, and David was playing on the harp with his hands. And Saul sought to smite David with the spear, and David withdrew suddenly from the presence of Saul, and he drove the spear into the wall, and David retreated and escaped. And it came to pass in that night that Saul sent messengers to the house of David to watch him, in order to slay him in the morning. And Melchol, David's wife, told him, saying, Unless thou save thy life this night, tomorrow thou shalt be slain. So Melchol lets David down by the window, and he departed, and fled, and escaped. And Melchol took images, and laid them on the bed, and she put the liver of a goat by his head, and covered them with clothes. And Saul sent messengers to take David, and they say that he is sick. And he sends to David, saying, Bring him to me on the bed, that I may slay him. And the messengers come, and behold, the images were on the bed, and the goat's liver at his head. And Saul said to Melchol, Why hast thou thus deceived me, and suffered my enemy to depart? And he has escaped. And Melchol said to Saul, He said, Let me go, and if not, I will slay thee. So David fled and escaped, and comes to Samuel to Armathaim, and tells him all that Saul had done to him. And Samuel and David went, and dwelt in Naboth in Ramah. And it was told Saul, saying, Behold, David is in Naboth in Ramah. And Saul sent messengers to take David, and they saw the assembly of the prophets. And Samuel stood as appointed over them. And the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they prophesied. And it was told Saul, and he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. And Saul sent again a third set of messengers, and they also prophesied. And Saul was very angry, and went himself also to Armathaim. And it comes as far as the well to the threshing floor that is in Sephi. And he asked and said, Where are Samuel and David? And they said, Behold, in Naboth in Ramah. And he went thence to Naboth in Ramah. And there came the Spirit of God upon him also. And he went on prophesying till he came to Naboth in Ramah. And he took off his clothes and prophesied before them, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. Therefore they said, Is Saul also among the prophets? And David fled from Naboth in Ramah, and comes into the presence of Jonathan. And he said, What have I done, and what is my fault? And wherein have I sinned before thy father, that he seeks my life? And Jonathan said to him, Far be it from thee, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will not do anything great or small without discovering it to me. And why should my father hide this matter from me? This thing is not so. And David answered Jonathan, and said, Thy father knows surely that I have found grace in thy sight. And he said, Let not Jonathan know this, lest he refuse his consent. But as the Lord lives and thy soul lives, as I said, the space is filled up between me and death. And Jonathan said to David, What does thy soul desire, and what shall I do for thee? And David said to Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I shall not on any account sit down to eat, but thou shalt let me go, and I will hide in the plain till evening. And if thy father do in any wise inquire for me, then shalt thou say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem his city, for there is there a yearly sacrifice for all the family. If he shall say thus, Well, all is safe for thy servant. But if he shall answer harshly to thee, know that evil is determined by him. And thou shalt deal mercifully with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thyself. And if there is iniquity in thy servant, slay me thyself. But why dost thou thus bring me to thy father? And Jonathan said, That be far from thee, for if I surely know that evil is determined by my father to come upon thee, although it should not be against thy cities, I will tell thee. And David said to Jonathan, Who can tell me if thy father should answer roughly? And Jonathan said to David, Go, and abide in the field. And they went out both into the field. And Jonathan said to David, The Lord God of Israel knows that I will sound my father as I have an opportunity, 3 several times. And behold, if good should be determined concerning David, and I do not send to thee to the field, God do so to Jonathan, and more also, as I shall also report the evil to thee, and make it known to thee. And I will let thee go, and thou shalt depart in peace, and the Lord shall be with thee, as he was with my father. And if indeed I continue to live, then shalt thou deal mercifully with me. And if I indeed die, thou shalt not withdraw thy mercy from my house forever. And if thou doest not, when the Lord cuts off the enemies of David, each from the face of the earth, should it happen that the name of Jonathan be discovered by the house of David, then let the Lord seek out the enemies of David. And Jonathan swore yet again to David, because he loved the soul of him that loved him. And Jonathan said, Tomorrow is the new moon, and thou wilt be inquired for, because thy seat will be observed as vacant. And thou shalt stay 3 days, and watch an opportunity, and shalt come to thy place where thou mayest hide thyself in the day of thy business, and thou shalt wait by that Argab. And I will shoot 3 arrows, aiming them at a mark. And behold, I will send a lad, saying, Go find me the arrow. If I should expressly say to the lad, The arrow is here, and on this side of thee, take it, Then come, for it is well with thee, and there is no reason for fear, as the Lord lives. But if I should say thus to the young man, the arrow is on that side of thee, and beyond, go, for the Lord hath sent thee away. And as for the word which thou and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is witness between me and thee forever. So David hides himself in the field, and the new month arrives, and the king comes to the table to eat. And he sat upon his seat, as in former times, even on his seat by the wall. And he went before Jonathan. And Abner sat on one side of Saul, and the place of David was empty. And Saul said nothing on that day, for he said, It seems to have fallen out that he is not clean, because he has not purified himself. And it came to pass on the morrow, on the 2nd day of the month, that the place of David was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son, Why has not the son of Jesse attended both yesterday and today at the table? And Jonathan answered Saul, and said to him, David asked leave of me to go as far as Bethlehem his city. And he said, Let me go, I pray thee, for we have a family sacrifice in the city, and my brethren have sent for me. And now, if I have found grace in thine eyes, I will even go over and see my brethren. Therefore he is not present at the table of the king. And Saul was exceedingly angry with Jonathan, and said to him, Thou son of traitorous damsels, for do I not know that thou art an accomplice with the son of Jesse to thy shame, and to the shame of thy mother's nakedness? For so long as the son of Jesse lives upon the earth, thy kingdom shall not be established. Now then, send and take the young man, for he shall surely die. And Jonathan answered Saul, Why is he to die? What has he done? And Saul lifted up his spear against Jonathan to slay him. So Jonathan knew that this evil was determined on by his father to slay David. And Jonathan sprang up from the table in great anger, and did not eat bread on the 2nd day of the month, for he grieved bitterly for David, because his father determined on mischief against him. And the morning came, and Jonathan went out to the field, and he appointed to do for a signal to David, and a little boy was with him. And he said to the boy, Run, find me the arrows which I shoot. And the boy ran, and Jonathan shot an arrow, and sent it beyond him. And the boy came to the place where the arrow was, which Jonathan shot. And Jonathan cried out after the lad, and said, The arrow is on that side of thee, and beyond thee. And Jonathan cried out after this boy, saying, Make all speed, and stay not. And Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows, and brought the arrows to his master. And the boy knew nothing, only Jonathan and David knew. And Jonathan gave his weapons to his boy, and said to his boy, Go, enter into the city. And when the lad went in, then David arose from the Argob, and fell upon his face, and did obeisance to him 3 times, and they kissed each other, and wept for each other, for a great while. And Jonathan said to David, Go in peace, and as we have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord shall be witness between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. Even so let it be. And David arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Psalm 84, 85 in Hebrew. For the end, a psalm for the sons of Korah. O Lord, thou hast taken pleasure in thy land. Thou hast turned back the captivity of Jacob. Thou hast forgiven thy people their transgressions. Thou hast covered all their sins. Pause. Thou hast caused all thy wrath to cease. Thou hast turned from thy fierce anger. Turn us, O God of our salvation, and turn thine anger away from us. Wouldst thou be angry with us forever? Or wilt thou continue thy wrath from generation to generation? O God, thou wilt turn and quicken us, and thy people shall rejoice in thee. Show us thy mercy, O Lord, and grant us thy salvation. I will hear what the Lord God will say concerning me, for he shall speak peace to his people and to his saints, and to those that turn their heart toward him. Moreover, his salvation is near them that fear him, that glory may dwell in our land. Mercy and truth are met together, righteousness and peace have kissed each other. Truth has sprung out on the earth, and righteousness has looked down from heaven. For the Lord will give goodness, and our land shall yield her fruit. Righteousness shall go before him, and shall set his steps in the way. Proverbs chapter 17, verses 24 through 28. The countenance of a wise man is sensible, but the eyes of a fool go to the ends of the earth. A foolish son is a cause of anger to his father, and grief to her that bore him. It is not right to punish a righteous man, nor is it holy to plot against righteous princes. He that forbears to utter a hard word is discreet, and a patient man is wise. Wisdom shall be imputed to a fool who asks after wisdom, and he who holds his peace shall seem to be sensible. The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 10, verses 25 through 42. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor? And Jesus answering said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him, and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Which now of these 3, thinkest thou, was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go, and do thou likewise. Now it came to pass, as they went, that he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet, and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about much serving, and came to him, and said, Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she help me. And Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her.